Halo 5 Guardians has one of the worst campaigns and stories in video game history. And I'm not really sure who to blame for all of this, because it seems like every aspect of Halo 5's story was screwed up. Everything this story tries to do, it fails. And this is Halo. This is a franchise known for its quality storytelling. And with such a huge budget, how was this the end result?
I don't like it.
Now there's a couple theories I have for why Halo 5's campaign turned out so terribly. One, everyone that worked on Halo 5's campaign had no idea what they were doing, what they were trying to do, or how to tell a good story. 343 hired a totally inept group of writers and staff. 2, Microsoft intervened at some point and changed the design process of Halo 5's story, resulting in what we have now. It could even be a combination of both, but I'll leave that up for you guys to decide. I don't think anyone is happy with this story. I don't think 343 is happy. I don't think Microsoft is happy. I'm not happy with it. Nobody is happy with this story. Now this is going to be a straight up review. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to bullshit. I'm not going to dance around, okay? I'll point out things that I think are good if I come across them. Now the sad part about Halo 5's story is that it will never go away. It cannot be remade or redone. This is the story the game released with, and there's no going back from that. In fact, Halo 5's story is so bad that it's actually the perfect example for how not to tell a story. Now I think we all know that Halo 5's story is pretty bad, but just how bad is it? And where do I even begin dissecting this monstrosity? Well, I'm gonna start off with the thing that pissed all of us off. Number 1, hunt the lies. The first and most obvious problem with Halo 5's story is the godforsaken marketing. I'll admit it, 343. After watching those trailers and videos, I sincerely thought there was going to be an awesome story told in Halo 5. All of the advertisements painted a truly epic picture. A newer brand of Spartan 4s, Team Osiris, against a group of renegade Spartan 2s, and Blue Team, emerging from their stories to reconnect with the Master Chief? Chief versus Locke? 2 Spartans within seconds of executing each other? Who would be victorious? Shit, I gotta get this game. This story looks awesome. These visions and ads made such an impression on everyone who watched them. They showed radical changes to the Halo story and an interesting conflict between the 2 characters you'd be playing as. We all eagerly awaited the 5th installment in the Master Chief saga. After Cortana died, Chief was finally starting to show some subtle emotions. He looked to be in a vulnerable state.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
This would be the perfect time to explore themes of PTSD, soldiers as machines, war, older versus newer generations. The possibilities were endless. And just like me, you were probably super excited after watching some of these ads. You probably thought Halo 5 was going to have a kick-ass story, maybe even the best story in the Halo franchise. But what you didn't realize was that you were fucking lied to. These scenes reflect a setting we never see, conflicts we never get to experience, character development that never happens, and badass dialogue that is non-existent in Halo 5.
I'm not so much hunting a Spartan as I'm hunting the Spartan.
It's almost like there was going to be an entirely different story, but that they changed it halfway through and kept the marketing ads for the story they were going to have. Now, when you're marketing a game, you need to have ads that reflect what is going to happen, what players can expect from it. When your advertisements are so slimy and deceptive, and it just pisses off the community of fans that you have, you really need to rethink your marketing strategy with this. Because the last thing you want your fans to think is, am I being deceived? Am I being tricked? Was this all a lie? So what 343 needed to do was stick with the story in the marketing or change the marketing, but they didn't do either, so the marketing is lies. Pretty much everything the trailers and ads showed is non-existent in Halo 5, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't happen. Or does it? I don't know. Is this real? It's incredible how little all this marketing matters in the grand scheme of things. Looking back, we're gonna see it as those deceptive ads that tried to sell us a story that never existed. And we're not gonna look at it as, oh, fuck yeah, I remember getting so hyped for this. When we look back at the other Halo games marketing, we can get fucking hyped for it.
There are things about Halo even the hierarchs do not understand.
But when we look back at Halo 5's marketing, we're going to remember those feelings of being tricked and lied to. And that's the worst part of Halo 5's marketing. Alright, so I'm done talking about the marketing. And so now you might be thinking that we're going to move on to the actual campaign, right? Wrong! There's yet another fatal flaw with the setup of Halo 5. As if the deceptive marketing wasn't bad enough, this is actually worse. Number 2. The writers expect you to know all of the expanded lore. This is the thing that alienates so many people from being able to enjoy Halo 5's story. Not enjoy, understand. Just look at this diagram. This is all the material you have to know in order to simply understand Halo 5's campaign. Let's look at this, okay? You've got Halo Escalation, a comic book series. New Blood, the book where Buck becomes a Spartan. Fall of Reach, origins of Blue Team and Spartan 2 program. Master Chief Collection, the cutscene where Locke was first revealed as a Spartan talking to the Arbiter. Trailers, Halo Last Light, exploration of Blue Team. A novel, Hunt the Truth podcasts. Who Can Tell You the Truth? Blah. Halo Nightfall, a TV series that gives the background to Agent Locke. Hunters in the Dark, introduction to Olympia Vale. Like, holy shit, just stop. Just stop with all of this. No longer is it possible for players to simply put in a Halo game, be able to play the campaign, and enjoy it just on its own. That's not possible. You've got to do your fucking homework, okay? You've got to read the comic books, you've got to read the novels, you've got to watch the animated TV series, you've got to watch the trailers, you've got to listen to the podcast, you've got to watch Halo Nightfall, and if you don't, well, you're not going to understand jack shit because you're not a true Halo fan and you don't fucking do your homework. God. This is the worst possible setup you could have for your story and campaign. Not only is your marketing incredibly deceptive and full of lies, but the entire premise, plot, and characters of your story can only be understood from things that are outside of that story. I'm not bashing the expanded universe. I'm not bashing any of these things because truth be told, I haven't read or watched any of them. So I'm not criticizing those stories. What I am criticizing is the fact that they are essential to understanding what is in the actual game. Now, the way they should have done this is they should have put all these essential parts into the story. And if they can't do that, then create a story that has all these essential parts. And then, once you release the game, people love the story and everyone wants more, then release your comic books, your novels, your TV shows, okay? That's how you fucking market this. That's how you get people into it. Now, looking at this diagram, we can all agree that Halo 5's campaign and story only appeals to people who have read or watched this material. And not only that, but you have to buy these books. That's more shit you have to buy and spend your time in. It would be fine if Halo 5 Guardians told a complete, incredible story, but it doesn't. And it's because of this that it doesn't, because the most essential plot points are not in the game. It's as bad as Grimoire cards for Destiny. Now we can see how the entire campaign and story was set up to fail, before we even see the first cutscene. Number 3, big dumb intro. You know, I could talk about how dumb this intro is for like 5 hours. So the game starts off strong with a cutscene that has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the game. Yes, the very first cinematic that we see has no relevance whatsoever. The conflict of Oni trying to kill Halsey and Cortana is mentioned in this cutscene.
They'll order you to kill us both.
but it is never explored in the rest of the campaign. Why the fuck didn't they cut this scene out? Anyways, the game starts up looking pretty good, but then right off the bat, we get boring exposition from Captain A and Commander Boring. They say there's been Forerunner attacks on 5 different colonies, but rather than opening up with footage that shows these attacks, builds the drama, and establishes the villains and what they're capable of, the game just has 2 boring, unintroduced characters talk about it. And just because you tell us that people are dying and there's massive destruction, that doesn't mean we're going to instantly care about it. Hey 343, you ever heard of show don't tell? So exposition tells us that Dr. Halsey has information on these attacks and is being held captive on Kamchatka by Julam Dama. Whatever the hell Kamchatka is and whoever the hell Julam Dama is. So they give Fireteam Osiris a mission briefing, which seems oddly misplaced because we don't even know who Fireteam Osiris is yet. What are they doing on the Pelican if they're just being briefed on their mission right now? They should be in a briefing room or the Bridge of the Infinity.
Tracking gear online.
Affirmative.
Well, that dialogue was utterly pointless. Who are you?
Say, before we make this jump, anybody want to say a few words?
No, wait, who are you? So let me get reintroduced to Buck, who is now a Spartan. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is something utterly ridiculous that makes no sense.
I figure if God can hear how scared I am, so can everyone else.
Wait, what? What does that even mean? I couldn't tell you were scared, not by the tone of your voice or what you said. And if God can hear how scared you are, you're bringing God into this? Everyone else knows you're scared too, eh? Gee, you probably shouldn't be telling everyone what a scared little pussy you are, right before this dangerous mission. Within 2 minutes of starting the game, we're already getting dialogue that makes no sense. Good shit, Brian. Good shit. Then there's a failed attempt to create some sort of connection between Locke and Buck, and they're off. Well, the music is pretty awesome, but we're quickly going to see why this opening cutscene ruins the pacing and is utterly pointless. Alright, so they're jumping down into, wait, what the hell? What's going on? There's a dogfight? Between who? Who's fighting what? What are they fighting about? You see, these are the kinds of questions an opening scene is supposed to answer. Instead, Halo 5 dives straight into mindless action. Wait a minute, I thought they were supposed to go behind enemy lines.
Your mission is to insert behind enemy lines, retrieve Halsey, and bring her back to Infinity.
Did you guys even listen to the briefing? Did the pilot just fuck up and drop you guys off in the wrong location? So at this point, Osiris is running down a mountain in a location we know nothing about, fighting enemies in a conflict we have no interest in. You see, this cutscene was also part of the marketing, and on its own, it's pretty goddamn impressive. It shows off incredible graphics and the new Spartan abilities, which look fantastic. The problem is, this does nothing for the story. We know next to nothing about these characters, the setting, or the plot before they're jumping off into this Michael Bay action scene. There's no tension in this scene because we don't know what's going on, and there's nothing at stake for us to care. What's worse is that this opening scene only makes Osiris and the Covenant look like a bunch of retards. Wait, why are you jumping onto that ship? Why are you risking your life, disobeying orders just to kill a few sword elites? Your mission is to rescue Halsey, you idiot. And you know what? Those sword elites should have fucking killed her. Look at how poorly choreographed this fight scene is. Like, what are those elites doing off screen? They're just standing there. Turn around and kill her. You jackals, use your gun and fucking shoot her. This whole scene makes the Covenant look like a joke. If an entire army is unable to subdue just a single Spartan, even when they recklessly jump into your dropship, then what does that say about the Covenant? If there's nothing at stake and the lives of the Spartans are not at risk, then there is no investment in the scene and the tension is gone. This is mind-numbing. You aren't meant to think about this scene too much. It's action. It's your medicine to help you forget about all the plot points they didn't address. An opening scene to a story, movie, or game is what's known as the hook and the introduction. It's the thing that grabs your attention right from the start. And while this scene could have worked, it doesn't because the basics are never explained. The other Halo games use their opening cinematic to establish characters, setting, motivations.
I will continue my campaign against the humans.
No!
Plot.
Master Chief, defend this station.
Yes, sir. I need a weapon.
Right this way.
and usually left all the action scenes to the gameplay. But with Halo 5, nothing gets established properly. The most basic elements of storytelling are not given the right amount of attention. Having watched just the intro and knowing how badly the whole story was set up, we can already see the major problems manifesting and just how broken the story is 3 minutes into the opening cutscene. Warning. Clarification. At the beginning of Part 1, I said that I thought Halo 5 had one of the worst campaigns and stories in video game history. What I meant to say is that Halo 5 has the worst story in the Halo franchise, and it is a piece of My previous statement suggests Halo 5 sits next to Shaq Fu, Destiny, Superman 64, and other steaming loads of shit like that. And Halo 5's story just isn't in that same category, and I can't, in good faith, say it is. But it's still shit. Enjoy Part 2. Mission 1, Osiris. So now we're fighting our enemies, and we're in some kind of war. And who knows what's at stake or what even caused this battle. There's a bunch of forgettable exposition throughout this mission, and then we get another cutscene. This one shows the dramatic rescue of Dr. Halsey, in what could possibly be the most barf-inducing cutscene of Halo 5. We get a little banter between Jewel Madama and Halsey. The writers try to establish some sort of context for why Jewel and Halsey are here, but it's told in the form of incomprehensible jargon. Halsey's talking about triangulating and talking to someone, chasing shadows, and I don't have a goddamn clue what any of that means. Did I miss something? How about you tell me about the Promethean Covenant fight going on? Tell me something useful through this dialogue. And then, oh boy, another action scene. Number 4. Mind-numbing fight scenes. So when there's an action or fight scene in any story, there needs to be something else going on besides the fight itself. For example, when Will, Jack, and Norrington are fighting in Dead Man's Chest, they're not just fighting because it's an action scene. They're fighting for power. They're fighting for what they truly want. A key that will give them control over their lives again.
Do excuse me while I kill the man who ruined my life. Be my guest.
And it's icing on the cake when a scene like this has incredible choreography. Fights are a great way to create interesting conflicts and give characters more depth.
I'm not gonna hold back this time.
I know. I won't either.
It can show us the differences of the people fighting.
I am so gonna kick your ass. No. I'm gonna kick your ass. Oh, it's on now.
Or reveal something about a character that we didn't know. They can also show the audience what the characters are fighting for and what makes them who they are. A good fight scene is one where you're invested in the characters and you have someone or something to root for. So let me ask you this. What are the characters fighting for? Jewel is fighting to defend himself, and Osiris is fighting because they were ordered to. This fight is as shallow as it gets, and that's the problem, is that we still don't have an emotional connection with Osiris or Jewel Mdama, and we don't care about this fight. So if there's no depth to this fight, then at least it has some good action, right? Wrong! This fight scene is choreographed terribly, but let's analyze it, shall we? So the first thing that bugs me is that Jewel is supposed to be the Supreme Covenant leader.
Covenant Supreme Leader Jewel Mdama.
And yet he only has 3 Spec Op elites guarding him. Also, in the opening shots of this scene, we see a phantom floating nearby. But then, we never see it again. Why didn't it attack the Spartans when Jewel was getting stabbed to death? And then look at this elite right here. He's got his gun pointed at Locke. Take the shot! Take the shot! God damn, these elites are so clumsy and easily outmaneuvered. Okay, so is Jewel deaf? Is that part of his character? Because it took him 20 seconds to react to the sound of gunfire, turn around, and pull out his sword. And so one of the writers had the genius idea to kill off this villain in the first mission. But we just got introduced to this character. And yeah, you knew him from Spartan Ops, but that's the problem. If you didn't play Spartan Ops, you're fucking clueless. What point did Jewel even have in Halo 5? Just to shove a middle finger in the faces of everyone who liked him and played Spartan Ops? What the fuck? The best part is when Jewel says, after 3 of his bodyguards are already dead, and even then, none of them fire a fucking shot or do any sort of damage. You know, maybe these elites are volunteers and had absolutely no military training. Maybe there's some sort of disease that causes the elites to become incredibly slow and retarded. Now, there's a reason why all of the action scenes in Halo 5 don't work, and that's because there's nothing going on between the characters that are fighting. And in all of those scenes that I chose from their stories work very well, because we're interested in what's going on between the characters aside from the fact that they are fighting. Now, after watching this action scene, I can't help but think of all the different ways they could have made it a whole lot better. 1. Have Jul Mdama survive the encounter and become a sort of rival to Locke and Osiris. This would avoid pissing off all those people that played Spartan Ops, and also give Jul Mdama some reason to be in Halo 5 if he did something later. 2. Flesh out the conflict between Jul Mdama and Osiris a bit more. Maybe Mdama destroyed one of their home planets, or glassed it. Maybe he's been talking mad shit to the UNSC, and now it's finally time to put him down. 3. Just make it a really fucking good action scene with great choreography. So if the writers aren't going to make this scene interesting, then at least make an awesome, well-choreographed fight scene. Having the villain swing his weapon once isn't just terrible choreography, it's fucking lazy. So have this battle be a little bit longer, and have the Spartans struggle against Jul Mdama and his elite guards. But overall, the action scenes in Halo 5 all suffer the same problem. They're used as filler and not as a means to tell the story. Oh, how did you lose your arm, Halsey? Wait, I've got an idea. Let's never reveal that to the audience.
Captain Lasky, I sent you my position 3 weeks ago. I told you this was happening.
We'll discuss that in private, Doctor, in a conversation that the audience would like to hear, but never will. And then Buck's like,
What do you think that's about?
Hey, dude, I asked you a question. I mean, I'm staring right at you, and you're not even looking at me. Aren't we supposed to be friends? Why aren't you talking to me? Fine, whatever, dude. Fuck you. This is a perfect example of a situation where the dialogue could have been used to relay important information to the audience and give Buck and Locke some personality. But instead, Locke acts like he's fucking deaf, and the scene fades out. Mission 2, Blue Team. Or number 5. Why are these characters in Halo 5? So wait, who are all these Spartans? Apparently one of them was in boot camp with Chief. Okay, I know who these Spartans are, but you know who doesn't? The average player. Again, expanded lore material is essential to understanding the characters. And another problem with this mission is I have no idea why these Spartans are with Chief. How did they meet up? When? And most importantly, why? These are the important things that need to be shown to the audience in Halo 5. So if you don't show or give us a reason for having these characters in your story, what's the fucking point of having them in the goddamn story? However, there is a reason why Blue Team, Vale, Tanaka, and Buck are in Halo 5, and Frank O'Connor explains it.
You know, we're always looking to make significant changes or evolutions to the gameplay, and Halo's always had a legacy of co-op. It's you and 3 identical clones of you all running around not enjoying a logical story. If we make it a squad-based game, we can double down on co-op, we can double down on the idea of an ensemble cast.
Basically what he's saying, these characters are in the story not because they were essential to the narrative of Halo 5, but because they satisfy a gameplay mechanic.
If we make it a squad-based game...
Okay, back to the story. Look at this character's name, Infinity Comms. They didn't even bother to give this guy a name. Okay, so what are we doing here? What's the mission? Eliminate hostiles. What hostiles? Well, I guess I can't expect a character named Infinity Comms to be specific about anything. What an asshole. But seriously, why are the starting missions for each fire team so boring? Osiris was bad enough, but this mission's premise is eliminate hostiles. Really? How about Chief is looking for some secrets that Halsey kept about creating new cortanas, or he's looking for something to do with Cortana? Now I'm starting to get the feeling that Halo 5 has almost nothing to do with Halo 4. So rather than focusing on Chief's mental state, after losing the only real thing that kept him sane all these years, expanding upon the character development that Halo 4 set up, the writers decide to send him on some totally pointless mission with a group of characters that have no reason to be in this game. And then do you know what happens next? Can you take a wild guess? Why? It's another action scene, of course! And just like the other two, this one has the same problem. Wait, this was their plan? They didn't even discuss this. Did they all just telepathically communicate to follow each other through space, shoot open a window, and then dive inside? How did they know their projectiles would break the window? What if they all just flew into it and it didn't break? Did you think of that, Fred? 343 keeps portraying the Covenant in the most non-threatening, buffoonish way possible. I'm gonna get you.
What do we know about Argent Moon?
Wait, now Fred asks what they know about Argent Moon, the station that they just blasted into? Fred, you should know this shit already. No, he asks that so that Linda can blandly tell us about this location. So they keep talking about what they need to do, and they keep talking about it, and talking about it. And you think at some point they would talk about something besides the mission. Give the characters a chance to flesh out their personalities and their characters, and how they connect to the Chief. You know, something useful. No, put some more exposition in there. And then Fred drops a bomb.
The Covenant's war against the Arbiter must not be going well.
Wait, what? The Covenant and the Arbiter at war? And this is the way they revealed it to the player? Through bland exposition? Ugh. So before I talk about the next scene, which utterly breaks the story, I need to address the elephant in the room. Number 6, the characters. Now, the most obvious problem with Halo 5's story is its characters. There are so many flaws with the whole cast that it's going to take a while to explain everything that's wrong with them. Now, I won't be talking about Cortana specifically in this section, because I'm saving her for later. And as we go further into this story and this review, we're going to uncover everything that is wrong with Halo 5's characters and why they are so poorly written. And for this section, I'll just be talking about the basics. Now, I don't have a problem with the voice actors. They did as good a job as they could with this shitty material. Do we blame Peter Dinklage for his portrayal of the Ghost in Destiny? No, he's a fantastic actor. So we blame the writers and the shit job they did that hopefully got them fired. So do I think Brian Reed and the other writers deserve to be fired? Oh, well, you see... Characters are the backbone of any story, and it's pretty much impossible to tell a good story without them. There needs to be someone or something that connects with the audience, to get them invested, to make them care, and to make the story worth their time. Generally speaking, there are 4 types of characters: static, flat, dynamic, and round. Static characters are ones that don't change. Their personality does not transform or evolve. And dynamic characters are the opposite. Flat characters usually have one personality trait, while round characters are more complex. Not every character needs to be dynamic or round. A lot of stories work well with mostly static or flat characters. And the original trilogy of games are an example. Chief, Johnson, Cortana, these characters are mostly static, and they work in the overall story because they affect the narrative, they are interesting, and we can connect with them. Now, the issue with Halo 5's characters is that almost all of them are static, flat, and have little to no purpose in the narrative. So in Halo 5, we have 2 groups of characters, new and old. The old characters are all written so poorly that they barely resemble the characters we loved. They act, talk, and feel like machines, which violates everything that Halo 4 did with its story. So let's examine the Chief's character. Oh, but let me be very clear. The Master Chief in Halo 5 is one of the most disgraceful, disgusting, and offensive interpretations of the Master Chief it has ever been my displeasure to experience. In Halo 4, he was dynamic, his personality changed over the course of the story, culminating in one of the most memorable lines and moments in Halo history. Whether you liked or disliked Halo 4's campaign, you cannot deny the impact this final scene had. Cortana was dead, and Halo 5 would be the first game without her. Now remember, Halos 4, 5, and 6 are part of a planned trilogy, and each game is supposed to work with the others. They represent a 3-part story. Now the biggest problem with Chief is that in the original trilogy, he's a static character. In Halo 4, he becomes dynamic, but in Halo 5, he becomes static again. And this ruins everything that happened in Halo 4. Why? Why would you backtrack the entire last game? Now this is bad enough, but Halo 5 goes one step farther because the Master Chief is nothing like he was in the original trilogy. He doesn't have any good lines, except one. He doesn't make any jokes. He doesn't have any interesting interactions with other characters. He has become a machine. Not only does Chief's character in Halo 5 sever the connection with the audience, but it's a fucking kick in the balls to anyone that calls themselves a Halo fan. This is a fucking disgrace, and I'm sorry if I can't control my anger right now, but you know what, 343? You know what, Brian Reed? And you know what, Microsoft? You just took a character I've known and loved for over half my life, and you just kicked me in the fucking balls for loving him. There are only 2 reasons we have to care about any of the characters. 1, we cared about them in past games or other material. 2, we are told we should care about them. And that's where Halo 5 totally and utterly drops the ball, is that the writers are telling you to care about the characters. One prime example is Vale's dialogue.
When I was a kid, I was stuck on a diplomatic shuttle adrift in deep space for 6 months. My options would be real bored or spend the time getting smart.
So rather than showing Vale as some sort of diplomat between humans and elites, she tells us facts about how she learned Sangheili. And this is the recurring problem with most of the characters. Facts about a character are not going to make us care about them. What makes us care is seeing their humanity, their emotions, experiencing their trials and tribulations, and being able to connect with them as though they were real people.
Tartarus. The prophets have betrayed us.
And what's worse is that these fan-favorite characters are shoehorned into the game as some kind of fan service. But the only fan service it does is kick us in the fucking balls again! Now, in most stories, there is generally a main character, a protagonist, someone you're supposed to relate to. In past games, you were able to connect to the Chief. You were meant to imagine yourself as him, and that's why he talked very little. But it's hard to relate to anyone in Halo 5. The protagonist can't be Chief because we only see him 20% of the time. And it can't be Locke because Locke doesn't have a lick of personality. But because you play as Locke for 80% of the game, 343 wants you to think of him as the protagonist. And how funny is that? The torch of the Halo franchise is to be passed to Locke, a character we know nothing about, cannot connect to, and do not care about. So you might be thinking, I've already proven my point about the characters, but let's ask some other people and see how they feel. I've come up with one simple question in relation to 4 different characters to show the difference between well-written and poorly written characters in the Halo franchise. If this character was not in the game, how would the story change and what would it lose? The more the story changes, the more valuable the character. Sergeant Johnson, Halo 2.
Johnson is like, that comedy kind of character. He's the kind of guy that, he brings in relief in serious situations. He was the main character that sort of lightened up the story.
He's always there to kind of reinforce Marine morale. He's always interacting with the other characters. He almost single-handedly completely changes the tone.
Johnson was essentially kind of the light-hearted side of the story.
I would say that Johnson was there primarily for comedic relief, but he was also a a very important piece of the story.
He did something for the plot that no other character did. He was the one that really sort of allied with the Arbiter.
If you were to remove Sergeant Johnson from the story, you would lose not only the comedic relief, but at the end of the game, you would lose the bridge that kind of started the alliance between the Sangheili and the humans.
Vale, Halo 5.
I know that there's the... which one's Vale? She's the one in the orange armor, isn't she? And Tanaka's the one with the huge eyes.
Vale is the red one, correct?
Well, I feel like the story wouldn't change much, if at all.
She was the technical person, right? She did their tech. I can't even remember the character, to be honest with you.
To me, Vale isn't really much of a character. You know, all she really does is, you know a lot about elites.
Oh, the problem is like that was like the most genuine answer I had. I was trying to think of something to say about her. I cannot think of it.
Exposition, gameplay, they didn't really add too much. I mean, Locke was kind of a cardboard cutout, but the other three, even Buck, for God's sake, was dull.
In my opinion, if you were to remove Vale from the story, nothing would change. It would play out essentially the same.
Tartarus, Halo 2.
Tartarus, pretty interesting character, direct antagonist of the entire story.
He was definitely the main antagonist, especially for the Arbiter.
Well, number one, if you were to remove Tartarus from the game, you would lose the leader of the Brutes and pretty much the lapdog of Truth, one of the most important characters of the game.
So I think Tartarus in Halo 2, without him, we lose our understanding of what the Brutes are all about. I think he represents a culmination, basic form.
The story would change a lot. Tartarus was the one that led the betrayal of the elites. That was a huge plot point.
If Tartarus was not in Halo 2, it would monumentally change the outcome and the character development of the Arbiter. He's the muscle to the mouthpiece that is the Prophets, and he serves his purpose well.
Imagine Halo 2 without Tartarus. Who would you have, just another brute?
Warden Eternal, Halo 5.
The Warden is boring and not much of a character at all.
He was there to block you off from getting to Cortana too quickly so the story would end.
To me, he serves more a role to accommodate a lack of gameplay variety than actually serve a function in driving the plot forward.
The Warden's like a cheap replacement of the Didact when people reacted poorly to Halo 4 and filler for the campaign.
If Warden Eternal wasn't in the game would probably be a lot better.
So if you were to remove the Warden Eternal from the game, nothing would happen. In fact, the game would probably conclude even faster because all he served to the plot was slowing it down every time it started to get going.
He was a completely worthless waste of space. That's it. He was a seat filler. He was there to occupy space. That's it. He's got no personality, no interesting backstory. He is a giant generic robot with a crap voice.
Part 3. How to break your story. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. I congratulate you on making it to this decisive moment. Halfway through the second mission of Halo 5, we have come to the point where the story becomes utterly broken beyond repair. So Chief falls down a well, sustains no damage, and then has a psychedelic vision. It's Cortana, and she's spewing a bunch of dialogue that makes no sense. Woo, a Guardian! Then it fades out. Wait, what? Guys, this seems like a pretty important plot point. Don't you think you should have Blue Team talk about this more before you fade out? The way they respond to Chief's vision makes it feel like they're not even real people.
That's not possible.
You said she was gone.
They don't even bat an eye after Chief totally trips balls. This whole scene needed to be rewritten. Chief should have been weakened physically and mentally after seeing this. His teammates should have questioned his sanity. They should have canceled the mission and made their way back to the ship. There should have been an argument between Chief and at least one of the other members of Blue Team. This would have added a conflict between the characters, making their relationship more interesting. This would have made it plausible for Chief to go AWOL, abandoning Infinity and perhaps Blue Team as well, in search of Cortana. Then he would be chasing a vision. Everyone on Infinity would assume Chief was crazy, and as the players we wouldn't know what to think. It would create an air of mystery mystery, suspense, and tension, then it would make sense for Osiris to be tasked with hunting him down. This would have made Chief much more dangerous in the hunt, because now he might have mental problems and could fly off the handle at a moment's notice. And this makes the entire premise of Halo 5 plausible. Then the marketing would not be so deceptive. So there you go, that's how you could have killed 7 birds with 1 stone. But no, rather than expand upon this huge moment in Halo 5's story, using it for character development, creating tension, conflict, mystery, or giving it the time and pacing to be truly memorable, 343 pushes us right back to the horrible exposition and focuses on a completely pointless objective. Scuttle the Blargent Balloon. You've done it again, Brian. Then Kelly says something about the space station going supernova. What? According to Wikipedia, a supernova is a stellar explosion that briefly outshines an entire galaxy, radiating as much energy as the sun is expected to emit over its entire lifespan, before fading from view over several weeks or months. How does Kelly know this? Why is it even important? Is the Argent Moon really going to explode in that fashion? Nope, Kelly is just full of shit.
No signal on autopilot retrieval. Armada must have taken it out.
Well, gee, that's convenient. Maybe you should have parked it inside the hangar. You just had to have that ridiculous entrance, didn't you, Fred? Didn't you? Well, here's why that vision breaks the story. Another team is being prepped to deal with Cortana? Why would they prep a team to deal with her if they know she's dead? You see, after Chief had his vision, all the other characters in this story believe it like it's the truth. Like there's absolutely no possibility that the Chief is crazy. And we're supposed to believe it too. But we don't have a reason, and neither do the characters. So now every character's actions are based off the assumption that Chief's vision was the truth. And for the rest of the game, every character will act in ways that don't make sense, thus utterly breaking the story. Oh, and how's this for dramatic? This is the Chief going AWOL.
Negative infinity. I don't like it.
Are you fucking kidding me? Because this is pathetic. This is what the marketing built up? This was the climactic moment where Chief goes AWOL? Could they have made this scene any less dramatic?
You're to return to infinity immediately.
Hey guys, I'm not going to listen to you. Fuck, that's still more dramatic.
You're to return to infinity immediately.
I don't wanna. Damn, still too dramatic.
You're to return to infinity immediately.
Well, I'm not gonna do that. There we go, that's it. So first off, they needed to replace Infinity Comms with Lasky. Guys, I know you all love Infinity Comms and want him to have as much screen time as possible, but this way Chief and Lasky would have more character development. Show the players how their relationship has changed since Halo 4. And by this point, maybe he's getting really pissed off at Lasky. But over the comms, Lasky is able to convince him to come back to the ship. Then when he gets back on Infinity, the crew on the ship try to give him a psych eval. But Chief's not having it because he has to find Cortana. And Lasky tells Chief to give up the search because Cortana is dead. That's the point where the Chief should have gone AWOL. He should have gone crazy. So that's when he steals a ship from the Infinity and using his Star Fox pilot skills, flies to Meridian Station on his own. You see, it's really not hard to come up with an engaging narrative that makes sense based on what 343 has shown us in Halo 5. It's just that they did such a poor job of executing their premise that it makes Halo 5 look like a fan fiction written by someone with no knowledge of fiction writing, who was also drunk and knew nothing about Halo. Alright, so why is the Chief taking his fucking time walking onto the ship? Didn't he learn anything from his first encounter with the Halo rings? Yeah, he books it up to the ship to avoid the explosion. It's dramatic, it's tense. But in this one, he just walks onto it as the explosions go on around him. So then the station explodes. Wow, that was really close. If Chief had stared out at nothing for another quarter second, they'd all be fucking dead. Now I'm just as confused as you are right now. Why did this vision of Cortana happen on Argent Moon? Why did it happen when Chief got attacked by hunters? The pacing and timing is so atrocious. Again, I can't help but think how they could have made Argent Moon more interesting. Blue Team should have been looking for information on Cortana or something. Something that relates to Halo 4 and continues that story. story. Then when they have to destroy Argent Moon, it's like another piece of Chief's memories with Cortana is destroyed, and he looks out the window into space, contemplating. But instead, the whole purpose of this mission is that Chief has a vision. Nothing else matters. So now we're back on Infinity, where the characters keep talking about things that make no sense. And who the fuck is this yellow guy? Who are you? And then it fades out and what? God damn it, no, go back. You guys didn't address anything you just talked about. I'm still confused, if not more so than I was before this scene. So anyways, Locke and Buck talk about the new mission, which we must assume is to hunt down the Chief.
Every target is just another target, Buck.
Oh, what, now you want to talk to me, Locke? Huh? Is that it? I wasn't good enough for you in the first mission? You coming back to me like a cheap $2 hoe? Buck says that every Spartan and soldier will hate them. Why would they hate you? It's not like Halo 5 has shown us that every human and soldier knows the Master Chief and loves him. I mean, we got that impression in Halo 2, but we never get that in Halo 5. And then Locke says,
"You're not the only one here because of him."
Okay, wait, so Buck is on Team Osiris to hunt the Chief for his own reasons? And so is Locke? Do we ever find out why? No! Brian, please, just tell me what the fuck is going on. Please tell me before the scene fades out again. God damn it! This is a violation of Storytelling 101. There's a famous principle of storytelling called Chekhov's gun, which basically says that a writer needs to remove everything that has no relevance to the story. If you say in the first chapter that there is a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter it absolutely must go off. If it's not going to be fired, it shouldn't be hanging there. Buck and Locke imply that they have some reason to hunt the Chief other than just being ordered to do it. 343 puts this gun on the wall and then it never goes off. There's no payoff for this statement. I mean, it's pretty goddamn embarrassing when you have a multi-million-dollar game and you can't even hire a writer that understands the fundamental basics of storytelling. All right, so let me just stop the review right here real quick. All right, guys, this is fundamental basics of storytelling, like Chekhov's gun. This is like day 3 of fiction writing class 101. This is what you're learning. And it's like, do I need to go any further with this review? Like, do I really need to go any further? I don't want... Mission 3, Glassed. Oh, nice. This is a pretty cool opening shot. I wonder what's going to happen in this scene. What's with all the fade outs? Use a different transition for once. So now we're on an elevator and there's no jazzy music. 0 out of 10, I'm done with this review.
The Covenant blasted this planet in 48.
Tanaka, who the hell asked you to start spouting exposition? I did. God, it's the same terrible writing we saw in the first 2 missions. So this mission is supposed to be like Fireteam Osiris helping out the people of Meridian. But what is Osiris helping them with? Killing the robots that are on the planet? Well, why are the robots on the planet? Why are they killing people? How did the robots even get on the planet? Who's leading them? This mission fails at its overall purpose because what the writers are trying to do is get you to care about this conflict and the people of Meridian, and to show how ruthless the robots are, I guess? I'm not even sure. But I don't feel any connection to the people of Meridian or Governor Sloan or anyone. They don't show me anything that makes me care about this conflict. Once again, let's go back to Halo 2. After Cairo Station, Chief jumps out of the airlock with the bomb and he's flying it towards the Covenant ships. It shows us just how big the conflict between the Covenant and UNSC is. You see these ginormous capital ships battling each other over Earth in space. Small fighter jets buzzing around, explosions. It's chaotic, it's war. And it shows how one Spartan can turn the tide against all of this. It shows just how important and powerful the Master Chief really is. Then we go to Earth and we witness firsthand the destruction the Covenant are capable of. We see a deadly, huge enemy vehicle, the Scarab, and we see how even its footsteps cause destruction. We see the Pelicans get shot down like plastic toys. Because of these scenes in Halo 2 and the 2 cinematic missions that set it up, we understand what is at stake. We understand the gravity of the situation. The Covenant are attacking Earth. They have a foothold on it. New Mombasa, and they are fucking shit up. Humanity is in peril, and as the Master Chief, you've got to stop it. We don't get anything like that in this mission or Halo 5 in general, and that's why we can't get invested into this conflict of robots attacking a random planet and some people die, but who really cares and why should we care? Well, since nothing interesting is happening in the story right now, I'm going to talk about number 8, the technical stuff. So if you played any of the other Halo games in the last decade, then you probably know about all the hidden things in the Halo campaigns. Terminals, data pads, audio logs, and you probably know that all these little things are there to enhance the story, the campaigns, and also encourage treasure hunting. And Halo 5 has audio logs. Yep, 117 of them. Do you think that's enough? I mean, I get it. It's a Master Chief reference. But is that really worth having that many audio logs? I will admit, I had fun exploring the levels in search of them. It made for a fun mini-game with the Artemis tracking system. But once again, quality over quantity. I'd rather have 15 high-quality terminals than 117 shitty audio logs. It's just too much of a burden for the player.
Native defense system has been disabled, but Halsey was not able to bring alert system down in time.
God, this far into the future and that's what your audio logs sound like? Now let me bring up another point. Video games have so many ways that they can tell their story. Through cinematics, through gameplay, through lore, through background information, through audio logs. Anything is possible in video games. BioShock and Halo ODST are one of the few games that really did audio logs well. Most games that have them simply use them as filler, backstory, or exposition, and they're usually in random locations, are boring to listen to, and don't really have a reason to be there. And if Halo 5 wanted to replace terminals with audio logs and have that same impact that BioShock and ODST had, they needed to do a really kick-ass job with it. But they didn't. Quality over quantity, people. That's the recurring lesson with Halo 5. Now, another couple things I quickly want to touch on is that Halo 5's campaign does not have campaign theater, leaderboards, time trials, and only after 9 months of extra development did it even have campaign scoring. There's really not much to say about this. Because it lacks these features, it takes away the value of Halo 5's campaign. And the bottom line is, with this content on day one, fans would have had much more incentive to replay the campaign. Mission 4, Meridian Station. So we're on the first of 3 hub missions. And to be honest, I actually thought this was a good idea. Giving players a chance to walk around, interact with the environment, look for secrets, Easter eggs, talk to people, learn more about the world. It makes for a nice change of pace from how first-person shooters normally tell their stories. However, as is the recurring trend with Halo 5, it's a bunch of good ideas that just weren't executed well. Also, one of the things that 343 did right with this campaign is added cool new weapons throughout the missions. It's pretty awesome when you find them on your own, and it gives the player a sense of accomplishment, so that's a plus. Now we're in Halo Hell. At least the environments in this game are pretty and detailed. It's just too bad I don't really care. Oh god, now we actually are in Hell. Oh, this might actually get good. Oh, and you know when the door's shut, it's gonna be a boss battle. Banjo-Tooie taught me that. Now, one other thing. If you play Halo 5 with subtitles on, then the surprise of discovering new characters is going to be ruined. When Cortana is talking in that vision, before we know it's her, the subtitles identify her as Cortana, thereby ruining the surprise for anyone that played it with subtitles. And the same thing happens with the Warden Eternal. It's all the little things that add up, that make up the whole, guys. And this small example goes to show just how bad the management of the writing and subtitles was. Speaking of bad writing, Number 9, the dialogue. So if I haven't made it clear already, the dialogue in Halo 5 is absolutely terrible.
Affirmative.
Most of it is pointless, expository, or incomprehensible to even the most experienced Halo fan. A lot of times characters talk like they know what's going on when they shouldn't.
Watch out for the Kraken. The Covenant are trying to use it to break the Promethean lines.
How do you know what the Covenant's plan is? What the hell makes you an expert in Covenant tactics and weaponry? How do you know Argent Moon is going to go supernova?
Another team is already being prepped to deal with her.
How do you know Cortana is alive? So when you think of your favorite quotes from the Halo series, what comes to your mind?
Halo. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started. I need a weapon.
Right this way. And we most definitely regret the Corps just blew up our raggedy-ass fleet! Hoorah!
When you first saw Halo, were you blinded by its majesty?
Wake me when you need me.
Tell him to make it count.
Now let me ask you, are there any moments like that in Halo 5 where the dialogue really stands out?
Negative infinity. I don't like it.
I understand.
Hunters.
Who?
Chief. Look.
Maybe once or twice, but for the most part, no. Now let me explain some things that dialogue can and needs to accomplish in any story. It must advance the plot, keep the action going. It must be conflicting. Dialogue is best and most interesting when we have two characters expressing their conflicting views. It needs to reveal something about the characters and or show their agenda. Convey some sort of emotion, depth, or personality within the person speaking. It must provide important information to the audience. It should imply something greater. Characters should not always say exactly what they mean. Finally, dialogue needs to separate characters so that they don't all sound the same. Not everybody talks the same way or says the same things.
Affirmative.
Affirmative.
Affirmative infinity.
Now, every line of dialogue doesn't have to follow all of these rules, but when they follow at least two, that's a sign of well-written dialogue. Now, if you hold Halo 5's dialogue up to this standard, then about 90% of it should have been cut or revised to follow this rule. And when you cut 90% of the dialogue and the story loses nothing, then it's just wasting our fucking time. It's filler, pointless. Because most of the dialogue in Halo 5 only accomplishes the first one, advancing the plot. Both fire teams constantly talk about what they're doing next. Where's the reactor core? Where's the bridge? Where's the next objective? How do we accomplish X? And while a real fire team might actually talk in this boring manner, in a fictional story, it needs to be more interesting. Dialogue has always been a strong suit for Halo games. The audience needs characters that they can connect with. They need to understand the differences between them. Otherwise, everything just blends together and nothing is unique. If most of the characters just spout exposition, there's really no difference between them. It could be anybody telling me about the reactor core and it wouldn't change a damn thing about the story. Remember this section in the last video? You can really see how poorly written the dialogue is in Halo 5, because there's rarely a moment where it implies something greater. For example, it would have made a much more dramatic twist at the end if throughout the story, the characters are implying that Cortana is alive, instead of outright saying she is. This would build the drama and tension, because the player wouldn't know for sure, so the whole story would be building up to that final dramatic reveal. But instead, they reveal this huge twist 2 missions into the game, and it is ultimately disappointing and anticlimactic. Imagine if the other Halo moments were handled by Halo 5's writing staff.
Fate had us meet as foes, but after this is over, we will all be Flood.
And Cortana, let's fire our guns at the enemy. Cortana told me once that I am becoming a machine. Do you see the difference? When characters say exactly what they mean, it leaves no room for interpretation. Let's take a look at another famous Halo scene so you can get a better sense of what I'm talking about. When the Arbiter says,
"Were it so easy,"
he's implying that if he were to fight the Master Chief, it wouldn't be that easy. As the audience, we get to imagine how it would have went down. We understand the hidden implication behind this statement. The Arbiter is still pissed off at Chief. He hasn't totally forgiven him. So there's something interesting going on between them. And you see Chief jump as he sees the Arbiter, like he's ready to blow his fucking head off. Now, if Arbiter had said something like, "It won't be that easy to kill me," it robs the audience of a critically important moment. That type of writing is just bad. It's boring, but that's how Halo 5 is written, and it's a big reason why the characters and story suck so much ass. It's like the writers had this problem of introducing a bunch of new characters and had absolutely no idea what to do with them. So they just wrote Blue Team, Osiris, Arbiter, Palmer, Halsey as mindless expository drones. And in essence, that's all they are. The dialogue feels like the most unpolished aspect of Halo 5, almost like it never was revised. Because anybody with half a brain could look at the script and say, yeah, there's too much exposition here. And the biggest problem with the dialogue is there's so much of it. Characters just don't stop talking. It's a constant buzz in your ear for the whole game as you're just trying to enjoy where you are and what you're doing. We don't need everything told to us. Show us the story. Show us the relationship of Blue Team. Show us the relationship of Osiris. Show us why we should care about the conflict with the orange robots. And leave the telling to the important facts. What it boils down to is the idea of show, don't tell is the very first thing you will learn in any fiction writing class. And it is something that Halo 5's writing staff obviously does not understand. Part 4. Who are the enemies? Wait, I don't care. So what's one of the most important parts of any fictional story? The drama. The conflict. You can't just have a story about Locke picking flowers, going home, eating a nice dinner, cut to credits. It doesn't work like that. That's not interesting. And Halo games have always had interesting drama between multiple factions and characters of the Halo universe. But the conflicts in Halo 5 are so devoid of any real depth, emotion, or reason. And to top things off, we don't have a clear villain or a clear protagonist. Is the Warden the main villain? No. He just attacks you because you run into his cave or something. Well, apparently he's defending Cortana from Fireteam Osiris.
I stand in service to Cortana.
And earlier he let Chief and Blue Team through, but then why does he suddenly turn on them later in the game? Hey, dipshit, you let us through earlier. Why are you blocking our path now? What changed? I mean, did the level designers say, hey, let's put another boss fight with the Warden here, and then forgot that it made no sense in relation to the story? The Warden apparently has a conflict with Cortana as well. And again, we have the same problem. Why? If Cortana can use her magical abracadabra teleporting powers to control the Warden, why would he pick a fight with her? The conflicts that the Warden Eternal has with the other characters make absolutely no sense at all. No reason for conflict equals no drama equals no story. Are Locke and Osiris the villains? No, they're just doing what they were ordered to. Neither Chief or Blue Team have any conflicts with Locke and Osiris, aside from the fact that they have conflicting jobs. And because Halo 5 has no clear protagonist and the stylistic choices of swapping between two characters doesn't work very well, this conflict is empty and meaningless. Alright, so is Jewel or the Covenant the villains? Nope, Jewel dies in the first scene, leaving the Covenant without a leader and without a sense of direction. They are literally in this game just so you have something to shoot. Oh, but apparently the Covenant is at war with the Swords of Sang Helios, a faction of elites led by the Arbiter that conveniently popped up in Halo 5 in a vain attempt to give the Covenant some sort of purpose in the story. But this conflict has no depth. We're never shown what is at stake between these two factions. The same equation applies here. It almost seems like they wanted to throw in the Arbiter into Halo 5 for some sort of fan service, but then when they were writing the story, they were like, oh shit, the Arbiter doesn't have any reason to be in this game. Oh, I know. Let's have him fight the Covenant because... Then we've got the orange robots. Are they the villains? Absolutely not. Just like the Covenant, they're only here so you have something to shoot. Is Dr. Halsey or Oni the villains? No! That bit about Halsey wanting revenge against Oni completely dropped from the story. And the very first cutscene is all that we have to support this idea, and even then, that cutscene has nothing to do with the rest of the story. What about Cortana? Is she the main villain? Well, I'm going to talk about that later. Ah, then our villains must be the Guardians. Except, no, they're not. The only thing we see the Guardians do is appear at random, emit a few shockwaves, and then disappear. We are told that the Guardians are capable of massive destruction, but we never witness that until the final cutscene of the game. We are told that the Guardians are used to police worlds, but this is told to us in some random line of in-game exposition. If you weren't paying extremely close attention to everything that the cardboard cutouts were saying, you probably missed it. So for 95% of the story, we simply can't understand the Guardians and the conflict they bring to the table. As an audience, we simply have way too many unanswered questions. What exactly are the Guardians? What do they do? Do they actually guard something? How do they do that? Why? What is their purpose and how do they accomplish it? How are they controlled? What caused this massive surge of Guardians that apparently came out of nowhere and have never been mentioned before prior to this event? And you know, this isn't some random group of robots that appeared in the sky for no reason. This is the title of the goddamn game. You'd think there'd be a buttload of boring exposition talking about them. And there is. But it doesn't answer any of our questions. What the writers needed to do with the Guardians is show their power, their capabilities of destruction, and perhaps the mysteries of their origins, in order for us to understand just how powerful they are and get a sense of what makes them so dangerous. The problem with all of these conflicts that are supposed to exist in Halo 5 is that we never see any of these antagonists do anything bad. We don't really have a reason to hate them or hope that their evil plans don't come true. We don't even know what their evil plans are. In past Halo games, the villains were always clear. They had motivations, personality. They were interesting. Tartarus was a badass brute villain. The Flood and the Gravemind were scary, mysterious villains. Guilty Spark and Truth were deceptive villains that used persuasion and manipulation to try and accomplish their goals. The villains in Halo 5 are so totally underutilized that it makes it very hard to get involved or invested in the story. Now, the Prometheans are the saddest excuse for an enemy in a Halo game that I've ever seen. They're just robots with guns, okay? That's it. In Halo 4, they talk about this idea of how the Prometheans are really humans or forerunners that had robotic mutations so they wouldn't get infected by the Flood. But this concept is never explored or mentioned again in Halo 5. We need something for the Prometheans. Give them some reason to be in the campaign other than just being something to shoot. Now, if 343 was going to replace the Didact with the Warden, then they should have made the Warden the main villain. He has an awesome character model, and his powers of reincarnation could have been used as a way to help tell his story, and the story of the Prometheans. Maybe the Warden is a tortured Promethean who used to be a leading general in the fights with the Precursors or even against the Flood. Maybe he just wants to have eternal peace, but he needs to complete some sort of mission before he can truly die. Perhaps finding who will hold the mantle of responsibility over the galaxy. We could have been able to pity the Warden as a surviving war veteran who just wants rest and doesn't really have anything against the Spartans. He just knows they aren't the ones to hold the mantle. But because the writers failed to provide an interesting conflict or antagonists, Halo 5's story lacks weight. It lacks drama and meaning. It doesn't help when you have to fight this fucking turd 7 times. I mean, how lazy are you if you're a programmer that puts the same boss fight literally copy and pasted into the game 7 times? Imagine if in Halo 2 you had to fight 7 prophets. 7 prophets! Can you imagine how fucking boring and monotonous that would have gotten? Can you imagine the amount of hate Halo 2 would have if that was a design choice? 7 prophets! I mean, did 343 really think fans were going to react well to seeing this asshole pop up in every corner of the game? It's like the programmers who made the Warden Eternal were like, "This is the greatest boss fight in the world. We need to show everyone how well we can make boss fights." But couldn't they have given him more and more weapons each time you fight him in the campaign? Let's take a look at another game real quick. In Paper Mario on the Nintendo 64, you fight the same rival boss in every chapter of the game, so you end up fighting him 7 or 8 times. But in each fight, he has a new ability. As the game goes on, he gets stronger and stronger, and uses different abilities to change up the fights. The fights are different, and it's not just the same thing copy and pasted. So why couldn't 343 make the Warden like that in the campaign? Truly, the Warden Eternal is an awesome boss fight, but was ruined because of how many times it was copied and pasted throughout Halo 5. It has now become boring, repetitive, and irritating. In terms of conflict, Halo 5 has almost nothing. 343 had a huge amount of potential here to add some really interesting fights and drama between the characters, factions, and Spartan teams. But they didn't just execute poorly. No, no, no. They went so far as to completely ruin the character of Cortana. 343 manages to completely destroy her character in Halo 5. There's so much wrong with her. Her personality is all screwed up. She doesn't act, talk, or feel like the Cortana we knew from the last 4 games. I mean, just look at her. She's got the physique of a man, and all her previous models have been scrapped in favor of some social justice bullshit armor. Yet too bad that armor can't shield you from bad riding, eh, Cortana? And then she was brought back from her death in Halo 4 through some straight up Deus Ex Machina lazy ass fucked up bullshit. I touched the domain and now I'm alive again. Really? Not even a cutscene? The writers just throw that in there, again, in some random line of exposition. Was it really the next step in the Halo story to make Cortana the villain? This totally, absolutely ruins the incredible ending of Halo 4, and it ruins the character development of Chief and Cortana, as well as setting up Halo 6 with a terrible, terrible premise. Because now Cortana wants to rule the universe. That's the conflict of Halo 5. We have gotten to that point in the Halo universe. Prometheans, Covenant, the Arbiter, Jewel Bellagio, Swords of Sanghelios, Osiris, Blue Team, Warden Eternal, the Didact. Fuck all of the conflicts that could be explored with those factions and characters. Cortana wants to rule the universe now. It's just so wrong. When Halo has all these interesting characters, factions, species, and conflicts, and this is the direction they take the story. Cortana is Skynet now. But there's also something about Cortana's character in Halo 5, something that I find is absolutely unforgivable. Not only does bringing Cortana back from the dead ruin the entire Halo 4 campaign, but bringing her back as the main villain completely ruins everything that happened in the previous games.
What is this stuff?
Knowledge. A birthright from an ancient civilization. This AI is its custodian, and she has chosen you as her couriers.
Chosen? By an AI?
By this AI, yes. Her measure of you carries as much weight as my own, perhaps more. You are to take her to the UNSC shipbreaking yard in Azad. There you'll find a Halcyon-class cruiser waiting to get her off-planet.
I understand.
Do you? Mankind is outmatched. When Reach falls, and it will fall, our annihilation is all but certain. Unless we can glean from this artifact a defense against the Covenant. A game changer.
And what if we can't?
An apt question, if there were somewhere else to place our hope. There is not. Take it, Lieutenant. She has made her choice. Do you have it?
Yes.
Say the words, please.
I have it.
Good, because this AI is our secret weapon and will lead us to victory in Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2, and Halo 3. Then she's going to die in Halo 4, come back to life, and turn against humanity. Hope you're happy, Noble 6 and Noble Team. You died so that Cortana could become Skynet.
Protocol is clear. Destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable, and that means you're leaving ship. Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship.
If they capture her, then she won't be able to enact her diabolical plan to use the Guardians to rule the universe. Hope you die, Master Chief.
Radio for Vito. Heavy lift gear. We're not leaving them here.
Yeah, you're not.
Oh, crazy fool. Why do you always jump? One of these days, you're gonna land on something as stubborn as you are. And I don't do bits and pieces. Where is she, Chief?
Where's the AI that will use the Guardians to police the galaxy?
I'm getting you out of here.
No, you're not. No, don't let her go. Don't ever let her go.
Because she's going to come back to try and rule the universe. Blech. And if all that wasn't bad enough, we don't even know why Cortana wants to rule the universe in the first place. Her motivations are totally unexplained. Brian Reed and Frank O'Connor try to damage control this in, once again, the most disrespectful way possible.
Repeatedly throughout, we were talking to each other about how, Cortana is not evil. Cortana is doing a thing we don't agree with, and she has the power to make it happen.
They basically say that we don't understand her. She's not evil. Halo fans are stupid for thinking that because they don't understand what we're trying to do with the story. We don't understand what you're trying to do with the story because you left it off at a cliffhanger without explaining the motivations of the main villain. I've never seen a single design choice ruin so much in a beloved franchise such as Halo. But let's move on with the story.
The Warden said Cortana was calling them to her. She's not here.
How do you know she isn't here? Have you thoroughly checked this whole area? How do you know there isn't some hidden terminal somewhere? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you one of the worst cutscenes in video game history. By the Prophets. Do I really have to talk about this? This entire sequence of events pisses me off to no end. So Master Chief and Blue Team appear out of who the fuck knows where, and then Chief and Locke look at each other. But rather than standing his ground and acting as Chief normally does, he breaks character and tries to run away like a little bitch. Well, not run. More like a slight jog. Trying to burn those calories, eh, Chief? Alright, so this guy has his gun pointed at you. He's an assassin. Why are you just standing there awkwardly? Chief, we're only here for the co-op. Please carry this scene forward. You'd think that when a dangerous individual points his gun at you, that you'd pull your own guns out to defend yourself. Not even Chief draws his weapon. Is this the stupidest group of Spartans in the history of mankind or something? No, this is supposed to be Blue Team. The Spartan team that has more registered missions than any other team in UNSC history. But then Chief says something cliche in a very serious voice.
I have a job to do.
Cortana is our concern now, because we all know she's alive. We read the script beforehand, and even though it makes no logical sense that anybody besides you would believe Cortana's alive, she's our concern now. So let me just pause this before the fight breaks out. What are the other Spartans doing right now? Fred, Linda, and Kelly went through the portal and are just chilling somewhere. Buck, Tanaka, and Vale are just standing there watching. In this scene, we have 8 characters. 6 of them are doing nothing, and might as well not even be in the entire story. If Osiris was tasked with capturing the Master Chief, why would they get to this point where they have the target in front of them, alone, and then do nothing? Why bother having artists come up with the designs for these Spartans? Why hire voice actors? Why pay animators more money? All for the sake of putting pointless characters into the story. And I haven't even talked about the worst part of this whole scene. Number 12, the choreography. Now, I already talked about why the fight scenes in Halo 5 don't work back in part 2. So this section is going to go more in depth into the fight itself, because it's important to understand the difference between good and bad fight choreography. Now, I've been a martial artist for over 8 years. I have my first degree black belt, I'm a martial arts instructor, and I am also part of a demonstration team that choreographs and performs live action fights in front of an audience. I'm no Jackie Chan, but I do know what I'm talking about. The beginning part right here is good when he steals the BR and slaps Locke in the face with it, but then Chief loads up the slowest, most predictable punch possible. Then Chief grabs Locke's hand, and both of them seem to forget that they have other appendages because neither of them bothered to use their legs or other arm to gain the upper hand. Then Chief throws Locke away, and if you look closely, you'll see here that Chief is actually walking towards Locke with his arms down by his side. What the hell is that? Shouldn't the Master Chief be an expert in hand-to-hand combat? Chief, put your hands up and protect your face. If you don't, you might get... Exactly! Locke gets a nice kick in the Chief's face, only for Locke to slowly jump up, knee him a couple times, and punch him in the face. Hey, the Chief is down, and now's your chance, Locke. Use the armor restraint. Use it before he slowly turns around dramatically and shows the damage to his health. Exactly! Or wait until he turns around so he can see your trump card. Yeah, that's a better idea. The rest of this fight is just boring and slow. But then Chief gains the upper hand and pushes the armor restraint onto Locke. And the funny part is how Locke pulls out his pistol right at the end. But Locke didn't shoot at Blue Team or the Master Chief, and they clearly weren't worried about getting shot. So when he pulls out his pistol at the end of this fight, it's just a last-ditch effort to add drama, and it fails. Then Chief slowly walks away because he's a 60-year-old man that isn't really a Spartan and in no particular hurry. He also knows that the other 3 pieces of cardboard don't have jack shit to do with this story and won't attack him. This fight scene is the exact opposite of everything it should be. It's a slow-paced, anticlimactic, poorly choreographed fight between a 40-year-old man and a 60-year-old man. It is not a fast-paced, realistic showdown between 2 of the most badass, cybernetically enhanced super soldiers. This fight does not amplify the drama, tension, and conflict between Locke and Chief. In fact, it only serves to perfectly capture 2 of the biggest problems with Halo 5's narrative: how empty and meaningless the conflict between Locke and Chief is, and the true reason why Blue Team and Osiris are in this game. Game. And when I say realistic, I don't mean that it's an accurate portrayal of a real fight. I mean realistic in the sense that the fight is believable within the context of the story it's in. One of the reasons why this fight is not believable is because Locke and Osiris are trying to capture or assassinate the Master Chief. Chief and Blue Team are trying to survive, but at no point does this fight portray those things. Another thing to think about is sound design and setting. You can do a lot of really cool things when you have your fighters interacting with the environment they're in. And a good soundtrack can help define the style of the fight, with the sound effects and voice of the fighters adding to the intensity. And while Halo 5 does have some good sound effects, the soundtrack and setting don't offer anything special. And you know what this scene should have done? It should have illustrated the conflict between the 2 generations of Spartans. This should have showcased a great 4-on-4 fight, made use of the other Spartans and their new abilities, show the differences between Spartan 2s and Spartan 4s, and add an entirely new dimension to the Chief versus Locke conflict. Or it should have been a 1v4 ass-kicking of Team Osiris, with the Master Chief beating the hell out of them in a quick, efficient, brutal fight scene. Then Buck would have said something like, "He's a Spartan too, what did you expect?" The only good thing about this whole sequence is the ensuing escape, which is actually choreographed quite well. They utilize the Promethean structures and collapsing buildings in a nice way. Had the scene before this not been so terribly choreographed, this would have been a great follow-up to a dramatic fight scene. Now, I know some people might try and defend this scene by saying the action is supposed to be simple, so that your average person can see exactly what is going on. To which I say, no. An action scene like this between 2 cybernetically enhanced super soldiers should be lightning fast. The audience should barely even be able to keep up with it. And some people might say that this is a battle of honor, and that's why Blue Team and Osiris don't intervene, except that it's not. Locke is supposed to be a goddamn assassin. He doesn't care about honor, and neither should the Chief. Now, if I were to give you a reason for why this scene exists and is so poorly choreographed, it would be because the people who created it had no idea what they were doing, The writers did not have the talent to deliver the premise offered in the trailers, and this was the bare minimum they could do to avoid being sued for false advertising. I honestly want to stop the review right here because I'm so disgusted with the mind-numbing direction of the story, but there's still a lot that needs to be said before I can close the curtain on why Halo 5's campaign is so bad. Part 5. What makes a good Halo game? The tone and the soundtrack. There's something about Halo 5's campaign that took me a long time to figure out. Something I just couldn't put my finger on. You ever get the feeling that Halo 5's campaign just felt off? I'm not talking about the bland dialogue, pointless characters, or lack of explanation for pretty much anything. I'm talking about how the campaign felt. In other words, the tone. Now, the tone of any story is very important because it's how the writer expresses his or her attitude about the subject matter and how the writer conveys this to the audience. Tone is how a story feels. And most people don't pay much attention to it or really think about it. But whether you realize it or not, your brain does. Without even thinking about it, your brain is tuning in and your emotions take over as you feel the story instinctively. For example, when you first watched this cutscene that revealed the Flood, you probably had the feeling of suspense, of mystery, fear, uncovering something that was not meant to be uncovered. Or when you saw Johnson drop off the tank for the Chief in Halo 2, you got the feeling of morale boosted, badassness. Is that a word? Badassness? Or when Chief landed the cryotube at the end of Halo 3, you got the feeling of completion, a feeling of returning to the point you started at. You got the feeling of a fight that was finished. The Halo franchise has always been known for its superb storytelling, but what Halo has always been really good at, that most people might not realize, was setting a good tone. Now, all you have to do to understand this is go play through any of the other campaigns, and while you're playing through, ask yourself this: what do the writers want me to feel right now? Do that and you'll begin to understand why tone is such an important piece of what makes a good Halo game. Now, in most cases, the tone of Halo 5 isn't very clear at all, and that's why it feels weird. Like the fight between Locke and Chief. What did the writers want us to feel when we watched that? Disappointment? Yes, thank you. And I mean, what's the deal with this airline food? I mean, oh, right, sorry. Most of the time I could understand what the tone was supposed to be. The only problem is the story does such a terrible job of conveying the tone every time it tries. Like this scene where Tanaka is reminiscing about how far they've come together. We're supposed to get the feeling of a team that has been through a lot. A team that works together. A team that doesn't stand idly by while their leader gets bitch-slapped with a battle rifle. But everything before this has done such a poor job of characterizing Osiris, setting up their personalities and how they interact as a team, that we don't feel or agree with what Tanaka is saying. As an audience, it doesn't feel like we've been through hell and back with them. Halo games have always been really good at making you feel something important. It's one of the biggest reasons why the games are so beloved by people, because what they feel when they play it can only be described as sheer awesomeness. Halo's tone has a wide range and appeals to a lot of emotions that humans inherently have. Fear, love, anger, sadness, mysterious, death, excitement, nostalgia, reunion, redemption, and so on. Now you tell me if you felt any of these things when you played through Halo 5's campaign, and if so, how strong was that feeling? Yeah, that's what I thought. Now the soundtracks in the Bungie Halo games were so good that it cemented Halo's legacy. While everything that was going on screen was awesome, what tied it all together was the music. Whether it was during the cutscenes or the gameplay, Marty O'Donnell was able to implement a soundtrack that worked to damn near perfection. There's just so many key moments where the soundtrack just amplifies what's going on to such a degree that it creates memorable moments. Moments where you hear the soundtrack and you can say, this song played at this part of the game. Now, the music was always a very, very strong tool that Halo games used to form a connection with the audience and create a very strong tone. But honestly, the soundtrack in Halo 5 is just pedestrian. It's almost unnoticeable. Sure, there's a couple moments where the soundtrack is pretty awesome, like the beginning cutscene and the intro of Blue Team, but off the top of my head, despite all the research I've done, I can't think of anything else. And I'm not saying they need to copy everything that Marty did, but they need to be able to come up with a unique, memorable soundtrack that helps reinforce the tone and create a strong connection with the audience. Because the soundtrack has always been one of the biggest parts of what makes a good Halo game. There's a standard of quality that Halo soundtracks have, and Halo 5 just doesn't come anywhere close to that standard. You know, it's kind of hard to explain tone, because it's based on natural feelings that we all have. But in short, Halo 5 doesn't do a very good job of making the audience feel anything. Number 14, Fillard to the brim and fan service. It goes without saying that there isn't much of importance that happens in Halo 5. The game's got more filler than a dozen Twinkies. And filler is the stuff that goes on between the important things. It's basically meant to add or maintain a certain time limit or length of a story. Like, remember when Goku and Piccolo learned how to drive? Yeah, that was some pretty bad filler. But in the case of Dragon Ball Z, though many of the episodes contain filler, they've got 276 episodes. So that's hundreds of hours worth of entertainment. Now, the difference between 276 episodes of Dragon Ball Z and an 8-hour Halo campaign is a lot of time. So when you got a campaign story like Halo, where parts of it are almost like a movie, you really can't have any filler to waste the precious time of the audience and the story. If you're paying animators to create filler cutscenes, then that's a waste of resources as well. In a campaign like Halo, adding in filler is just a waste. Now, Halo 5 does have pretty much the shortest campaign in the series, but even worse, it has the most filler as well. So what we're left with is a story where not much happens. In a nutshell, Halo 5 is filler. I mean, the whole point of the story is to make Cortana the villain, have her gain control of the Guardians, and to introduce Osiris and Locke. Nothing else really matters. That whole trip to saying Helios was just filler so that 343 could shoehorn the Arbiter into the game for some fan service. Buck being in Halo 5, he's just there for comic relief and fan service. He doesn't really do anything that changes or affects the outcome of the story. That whole second mission with Blue Team was only there so that Chief could have a vision of Cortana and lead him to his next goal. And Blue Team was in the game for fan service to the lore addicts. Warden Eternal was in the game just to delay the end where Blue Team and Osiris reach Cortana. He didn't offer anything special. He was filler. Lasky and Palmer were in Halo 5 because they were in Halo 4. But in Halo 5, they're filler characters. They're just there. There's just so much damn filler. So much that I can't even cover it all in this video. And all this filler, it waters down the story. It's like we're drinking 15% beer and 85% water. It sucks and it tastes like shit. Makes the story much less guided and focused. Number 15. What is the greater purpose? In addition to the tone being an important part of what makes a good Halo game, another thing that most people don't think about is the theme, the greater purpose behind the story. Tone is how the writers want you to feel. Theme is what the writers want you to think about. What do you get from the story after you've read it? What do you learn from it? And all of the Halo games have explored a bunch of different themes. There's so much room for interpretation here, and while your opinions might be different from mine, neither of us is necessarily right or wrong. So let's take a look at the why, the themes of the other Halo games. And keep in mind, there are more themes than what I talk about here. Halo Combat Evolved is about discovery. It's about human survival. Halo is about the resolve and strength of the human race. Despite being stacked against all odds, facing multiple alien species that outpower us in every way possible, despite the fall of Reach, somehow humanity manages to come up on top because of our resolve, because you are a super soldier. Sure, you might have augmentations, incredible skill, and a badass fortified suit of armor, but underneath that armor, you're still a human, one human, that saved the world, the universe, and the human race from certain destruction. Halo Combat Evolved is about the galactic impact that one person can have. Halo 2 is about the dangers of religious fanaticism. It's about self-discovery. is about learning what is really out there in the world. Think about how the Arbiter's encounter with the heretic leader would have gone if he had only listened. Had Arbiter not been bound blindlessly to his faith, he could have learned about the lies behind his religion, how the prophets used and controlled him, and millions of other elites and the Covenant used them to believe in them as prophets of a great journey meant to bring eternal salvation to them all. Think of how the encounter would have gone between Tartarus and Arbiter had Tartarus only listened to him. Just like Arbiter, had Tartarus not been blindlessly bound to his faith, he might have learned the truth. Halo 2 is about having the courage to question the powers that control us, to not simply believe everything we are told, to be willing to learn, listen, and become better through our understanding. Halo 3 is about finishing what you start. It's about being able to put your differences aside with someone who feels like a complete alien to you. Being able to put aside your pride and work with your worst enemy. Halo 3 is about learning to forgive, but not forget. Halo 3 is about the sacrifices humanity is willing to take to ensure their survival. It's about honoring your veterans, honoring those people that sacrificed their most valuable possession for something greater. ODST is about reminding you that you are human. Despite who you were in the past, the pedestal you used to stand on, you can always drop down, back to Earth, down to reality. And sometimes that drop isn't pretty. Sometimes you realize just how powerless you appear to be. Sometimes it feels like the whole world is out to get you, that you don't have a friend in the world. But despite how things appear to be, it's up to you to find the truth. And that truth is, even if you don't have an augmented body and a super suit, even if you don't have the most powerful tools at your disposal, you do have power. And you should never underestimate your abilities to turn the scales in your favor. Reach is about the eventual death that we all face. But how do we face the death we know will come for us one day? Do we go out in a blaze of glory? Do we sacrifice ourselves for the sake of others, for a greater purpose that we believe in? Can we learn to embrace death when the time comes? Halo Reach is about never losing hope, never giving up. For as long as there is something worth fighting for, it is our duty as soldiers, humans, as whoever, to fight for it. Halo Reach is about remembrance, to never forget the sacrifices that were made to ensure you lived a good life. Remember the sacrifices people made to ensure that tomorrow was a better day. Halo 4 is about companionship. It's about learning to let go of your loved ones. For in time, all things pass. Halo 4 is about being able to move on with life, and that no matter how much we live life on autopilot, there will come a time when we must embrace our humanity, because we aren't just a number. We aren't just a statistic. We're more than just soulless machines moving through a life that has been predetermined for us. We are always human. And while you might think all of those themes I talked about are dramatic, maybe over the top, those are the themes that I believe in. Those are the lessons I learned from playing the Halo games. That is what I got out of it. If you were to ask me what the themes are for any of the Halo games, I would tell you what I just said, and I could go even more in depth. But not with Halo 5, because I don't feel the greater purpose behind Halo 5's story. Sure, I could come up with some bullshit answers, but I wouldn't believe them, and neither would you, because Halo 5's story has no greater purpose. It's not meant to teach us anything, to get us to think about any topic in particular. In my opinion, it appears the writers wanted to do all these cool, awesome things, but they never stopped to think about why they were doing them. What was the greater purpose behind everything? And because of this, it loses that thing that all the other Halo games had, that greater purpose, that reason for why the story was written. Number 16. Why is Halo 5's campaign so bad? So at this point, I've pretty much covered all of the important points I wanted to, but there's a far greater problem that I haven't talked about yet, and this is the real reason why Halo 5's campaign is so bad. The reason is Halo 5's story is a collection of great ideas, but it is nothing more than that. Think of any story as a puzzle. You got all the different pieces, characters, dialogue, setting, plot, tone, and all these pieces combine together to create a fantastic image. But before you create the puzzle, you have to know what the image is. And from there you create each piece and put it into place so that it works with the rest of the pieces. There are so many ideas and concepts that are carelessly thrown into Halo 5, but there's not enough focus or attention paid to any one of them to make them special, to make them unique, or to give them the time necessary to be memorable. It creates this misguided, unfocused game that lacks a true sense of direction. Halo 5's campaign is a puzzle with all these different pieces, but nothing fits together. Nothing is logical, nothing makes sense, nothing works. And it makes you wonder why all these pointless characters, plot points, and game mechanics were added in the first place. You got Frank O'Connor with this idea of adding a reason for co-op with the squad-based gameplay, but that idea led to the introduction of 6 pointless characters that diluted the story. And it didn't do anything else, except create a bizarre, frustrating spin on the gameplay in Halo campaigns. From the trailers, we see this idea of Chief betraying humanity, and this huge rivalry between Locke and Chief. But what we got was the most anticlimactic AWOL, and a terribly choreographed cutscene between 2 characters that don't really have any conflict between each other. We have this idea of the Artemis tracking system, which is a tool the player uses to find buttons and other stuff. But this piece doesn't work or have anything to do with the rest of the puzzle. It's not given any reason for being there, it's just there. We have all the new Spartan abilities and mechanics, which are ideas that are never explored or given any attention in the story. For some reason, all the Spartans can do these new abilities. There's no attention or justification for why they can do them. Why didn't Chief ever use these Spartan abilities before? We have the idea of Chief learning to live without Cortana, of Chief learning to become human, but that's hardly given any attention or screen time, so it's just an idea. We have the idea of an epic battle between the Swords of Sanghelios and the Covenant, a civil war. But that piece of the story has nothing to do with Halsey being hunted by Oni, it has nothing to do with the Warden, it has nothing to do with anything. Do you see what I'm getting at? In a story, everything is connected, because it's like a puzzle. Because all the different pieces create a beautiful image that you can enjoy. Every piece has a purpose, it has a place, a reason for being there. And the reason why Halo 5's campaign is so bad is because it's a mangled, incomplete puzzle that displays no clear image.
This is the biggest and most ambitious Halo campaign yet.
Yes, you're right, Josh. It is the most ambitious campaign. But what good is ambition if you can't execute the ideas? What good is it if you see yourself as the greatest football player of all time, but you don't practice? Brian Reed tells us that they had the idea of Cortana being the villain from the get-go. And in this dialogue, Frank O'Connor relays some very important information.
The truth is, we sort of know where we're heading.
Yeah,
we have some pillars, but we don't really know where we're going to end up.
What he's basically saying is they don't know where the story is going to go. They didn't set out with a clear destination. They didn't have a clear image of the puzzle they were trying to create. And there's an important saying that I think Brian Reed needs to understand. Begin with the end in mind. Now, what does that mean? To begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now and so that the steps you take are always in the right direction. This applies to life in general, but it also applies to storytelling. If you set out to tell a story with no clear destination, no clear plan or goal, what you're going to end up with is a complete mess. And if you need to have the story finished by a certain deadline, then what you got is what you got. By the time Halo 5 went gold, by the time they started shipping and sending out copies, this is what 343 had. Everything is created twice. There's the creation in our minds, the mental, and there is the physical creation, the execution. Anybody can create the greatest thing ever in their minds. That's easy to do, but it takes true talent, true vision to create it on the physical level, to execute. And that's pretty much it. That's all I really wanted to say about Halo 5's campaign. Sure, I could talk about the gameplay, the setting, everything else that's wrong with it. I could talk about it for a long time. But what I've highlighted in these 5 videos is what I believe to be the most important failures of Halo 5's campaign. So let's recap. The misleading ad campaign that painted a truly epic picture, but failed to be in the actual game. The apparent connection of the campaign with loads of expanded lore material, which alienated the general audience. The intro cinematics that ruined the pacing and started things off on the wrong foot. The action scenes that were wasted potential, meant to distract you and added nothing to the story. The pointless characters that were shoehorned in to satisfy a gameplay mechanic or act as fan service. Terrible dialogue consisting of 95% exposition. Poorly written and poorly developed characters that act nothing like they did in previous games. The lack of connection with the previous games, while simultaneously dropping everything from Halo 4. The absence of a true protagonist and antagonist, and attempts to tell a more complex story that jumps outside the fiction-telling norms, but a failure to execute this properly. A complete disregard for the fundamental basics of fiction writing. Chekhov's gun, show don't tell. Plot points with little to no explanation. Failure to make the player care or connect to the setting, story, characters. A cavalcade of terribly voice-acted audio logs, a missing campaign theater, time trials, leaderboards, and campaign scoring. Enemies and villains that we don't understand or care about. An unclear tone that players can't feel or connect with. Vast amounts of filler. And a bunch of ideas that don't work together to form a complete puzzle. These are the main problems, and the reasons why Halo 5's campaign is so bad. I hope through these videos you've learned something about storytelling. I hope you had a good time watching these. I hope I've been able to say the things that you were thinking but couldn't say yourself. And I hope you enjoyed this video series. What's up, everybody? This is the Act Man here, and today I'm going to be giving you my final thoughts on Halo 5's campaign. Now, in the 5-part review series that I did, I talked about a lot of things, but there were some things that I didn't talk about, or take time to mention, or go in depth about, and that's what I'm going to use this video for. It's just going to be a more casual style video talking about just my final thoughts, the last things I really want to say on it. So consider this the lazy but still thought-provoking part 6. So the first thing I want to talk about is the gameplay. Right, I had so many comments of people saying, why didn't you talk about the gameplay? Why haven't you talked about the gameplay? Gameplay. I think all the story elements are more important, at least in the case of Halo 5, because it's like, it's one thing for a game to have good gameplay, but a bad story. But it's another thing if there's a game that has a painful story and decent gameplay. So, in the case of Halo 5, the reason why I didn't talk about the gameplay in those videos is just because it's like, the story is so painful that it almost doesn't matter how fun the game is. At least in my opinion. Cringe-inducing is the word that I would use to describe the story of Halo 5. But there's a couple other reasons why I didn't talk about it. One thing is that on Legendary, the campaign is just aggravating. It's just frustrating to play. You're always tied down with 3 other Spartans that are connected to your life somehow. It really puts your life in the hands of your shitty AI teammates that can't revive you. The campaign had a very frustrating element. Like, it's a neat concept, but it was just so frustrating because you're constantly being followed by characters you don't care about. They're just constantly talking. I honestly wish I could play through the campaign without any dialogue whatsoever. That would be a much more enjoyable experience. Then I could actually enjoy the gameplay, but it's like, I'm not going to play the game on mute. You know, that's even worse. So yeah, in addition to the frustrating squad-based mechanic, just the feeling of the kills was so off in Halo 5. Like, it's something very subtle, but compared to the other games, it really stands out to me, and it really takes me out of the experience when I kill an enemy, and it doesn't feel anywhere near as satisfying as it did in the other games, except maybe Halo 4. One thing is the hit markers. Now, I get that hit markers are informative to the player when you hit something, I get that, but I don't want to see that in the campaign. It's a little quirk of mine. And it's another thing with the little death X mark that pops up when you kill something. I don't want to see that in the campaign either. You know, I just want to be focusing on the bullets and shooting the aliens. I just want to focus on that. There's something about those two things, the hit marker and the kill marker, that just make it a lot less satisfying to get kills. And then when you tie that to the fact that there's like no blood, it's almost like you're just shooting pellets, you know, and that really takes me out, you know, because when you're in Halo 1 and you're just blasting grunts with an AR and there's blood flying all over the place, it was great. It was great. It was so satisfying. Seeing that blood, you might think I'm a masochist or something, but, you know, the blood made it satisfying because you got to see, like, these alien guts colored all over the place. You didn't have hit markers or kill markers just clogging up the view. The gameplay in Halo 5 just has a lot of frustrating elements. Two of them were problems back in Halo 4 as well. And those are the way the game discourages you from exploring and the sheer lack of ammo. You know, in missions like Truth and Reconciliation or Nightfall, Winter Contingency, these missions increase the maximum ammo you can carry for your sniper, your assault rifle, and the game designers knew that you were going to have to shoot a lot of enemies and go through a long level, so they increased the maximum ammo. But in Halo 4 and 5, they don't do that at all. So some missions, you'll start at the very beginning, and with 1 or 2 encounters, you've already got to swap your weapons. Because there's just so many enemies and the game does not increase the maximum ammo count from multiplayer to campaign. It's a really frustrating thing, because half the time you pick up a gun and use all the ammo within about 1 minute. Now, one of the biggest things that just annoyed me was just how many invisible barriers there are in Halo 5 throughout all the levels. The first time I played the campaign, I was so hyped. I was running around trying to explore, clamber, jump, thruster pack into any places I could to try and find skulls or audio logs, and so many times I would just run into invisible barriers that just stopped me dead in my tracks from exploring the levels and seeing the beauty. And that's a really annoying thing. It's not like in Halo 1, 2, or 3 where you don't have some stupid return to battlefield thing or countless invisible barriers blocking your exploration. You can go wherever the hell you want in those games, for the most part. So yeah, the ammo count and invisible barriers throughout the campaign just made it a lot more frustrating and annoying. What also really bugged me about the gameplay is how all the enemies just felt so weird. They just felt so different. Like, hunters have tracking bullets. Like, they're super fast. They can melee you super fast. You can't really outmaneuver them up close anymore. And that's really stupid, man, because the hunters are supposed to have a weakness, right? But because they have homing bullets, and because their fuel rod cannons also home in, and because they have lightning fast reaction speed, really the only strategy on Legendary is to just hide behind a corner, pop out, blast them with bullets, and then hide back in. It's that mini boss fight against the 2 hunters in the second level, it's so Call of Duty that it sucks. And just the voice acting for all the enemies, it just... Just the whole thing. You know, the enemies felt so weird, the gameplay felt weird, the hit markers and everything, it just felt so weird. And in my eyes, it's like, why would I play Halo 5's campaign when there are other campaigns that do everything better? You know, the story, gameplay, everything. I feel like all the other campaigns did it way better. Debatably, Halo 4 might be worse, but I think Halo 4's campaign is better than Halo 5's. You know, there really are just a lot of issues I have with the gameplay, and the AI is a really big issue for me, because all the enemies have homing weapons, they have pinpoint accuracy, and what's interesting is they actually had to update the enemies in the campaign post-launch, because people were getting sniped by storm rifle elites, for God's sake. I just didn't really enjoy the way the enemies acted, how almost all of them have homing weapons, and how when fighting Prometheans, the ground was just cluttered with enemies, you know? The AI, the gameplay, and the feeling of killing enemies just wasn't satisfying or fun to me. It just makes the gameplay really not fun or enjoyable. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the level design, which is actually pretty good. Like, across the board, for most of the levels except for the 14th one, the Breaking, which is the most horribly designed Halo level out of all of them. It's bad. That's the one where you fight the 3 wardens, and you go on a very linear path, killing groups of Prometheans over and over and over. So aside from that level, which really pops out in my head as being really bad, the level design was actually pretty good. It felt like you had a lot of freedom, especially on Sang Helios. Most of the missions with very open levels were actually really fun landscapes to play in. There's a very nice feeling of freedom and many ways to approach the scenarios. So even though the gameplay isn't my favorite, the level design is pretty dang good and works well with all the new Spartan abilities. So a big thing I didn't talk about in my videos, which I probably should have, was the ending. Good lord. You might be thinking they were trying to go for like a Halo 2-esque ending where it's like, oh, I gotta finish the fight. But no, it's took you long enough.
It took you long enough?
Like when I heard that and I saw the credits rolling, I was just like, is that it? The first time I beat Halo 5's campaign and I saw that ending, I was like, I'm missing something. I am missing something very, very big. Took you long enough? What are you trying to aggravate me, Halsey? Like, that line just aggravates me. It's almost like she has no appreciation for anything I did. And the legendary ending, which hints at the rings being used, it's like, Halo 4 and 5 aren't even about the Halo rings. Like, not really at all. I guess they forgot about that and needed to remind us that, oh yeah, this is about the Halo rings, or at least it's supposed to be. So the ending was just a total cop-out, lazy as hell. The legendary ending made me even more aggravated, and it was just like, wow. Like, that is one of the worst endings you could possibly have. Arbiter and Chief don't even talk. They don't even fucking nod at each other and say, what's up? I remember everything we did in Halo 3 and how cool we were. Like, nothing. No satisfying ending whatsoever. It basically ended that way because they didn't know how to end it. So they just went for a straight up cliffhanger. Well, I guess we'll continue something in Halo 6. But there's really no debate with Halo 5. It's like everything in Halo 5 just really, for the most part, sucked. And then the ending just, like, slapped us all across the face again. It's like, what you showed us wasn't satisfying, awesome, or fun. And then you put the cliffhanger ending in there. As if we're going to be hyped for the next installment of the story. Now I want to talk about what I think is the weirdest and most bizarre part of Halo 5's campaign. And I kind of talked about it a little bit. There are multiple occasions where characters are talking face to face. And like one character will just completely ignore the other character. Like that scene with Locke and Buck. And Locke's just staring off into space. Like, he doesn't even react. Like, how unnatural is that? If someone walks up to you, says something to you, and you just... Then there was another case of that, where Blue Team is on Genesis, I think, and Fred's like, why did Cortana bring us here? And Chief just completely ignores the question. He just completely ignores it.
What's Cortana up to, Chief? Why'd she bring us here?
Let's keep moving.
Denied.
Then there's also that part where Blue Team asks Chief, like, what's it like having Cortana in your head or living with an AI? And then one of the characters is like, care to elaborate? No. It was like these obvious flaws of writing where it's like, would you like to elaborate? Yeah, give us some character development. No. And then there's a scene near the end where all the Warden Eternals pop up, and Chief's like, focus fire. And then they all just start shooting different Wardens. It's like...
And her people.
Focus fire.
You will not betray her!
Why are there so many instances of characters just blatantly ignoring what other characters are saying? That was like the weirdest, most bizarre part. It just blows my mind thinking about it. But I also think it's hilarious. So the last thing I want to talk about is, where does Halo 5's campaign leave us? Well, I talked about it in part 1 that this is the story we're stuck with. I also talked about it in my Can Halo 6's Story Be Saved video. But basically, we're kind of stuck with this story. And the worst thing about it is, it's one thing if the first story in a series sucks, because you can easily recover in the second one. But when it's a trilogy, and you've got the middle piece is the worst one, and it's terrible, and it disregards everything in the piece before it, the shittiness of the second installment plagues both the next installment and the previous installment. Whereas if you have the first one that sucks, that'll pretty much only affect the second one, right? But you could really recover in the second one. And then by the time you get to the third one, it's not so bad. You know, Halo 5 leaves the story in a very, very bad spot. And I hope that they can manage to make some magic happen and do something. I really don't know how they're going to recover or how they're going to incorporate all the useless characters and find a purpose for them, how they're going to change their writing style to make it good, to follow, you know, the fundamental basics of fiction writing. Or if they're going to break those fundamental basics, then you better get fucking Stephen King or George R.R. Martin to help you with the script. But that probably won't happen. But anyways, those were my final thoughts on Halo 5's campaign. That's really all I gotta say about it. I felt like I should at least clear up some of this final stuff and really clarify some of the stuff that I didn't talk about. So what do you think about the stuff I said in this video? I probably already know your thoughts on Halo 5's campaign. Whatever your thoughts and opinions are, post them in the comments down below as always, my friend. Alright everyone, that's all I got for today. This is the Act Man signing out. Peace!